A homeless man digs through a dumpster behind a video store in the Bronx. It's a Sunday morning, quiet, forgettable, until he opens a heavy black bag and sees a face looking back at him. 4 days earlier, a 13-year-old girl walked out of her middle school and vanished. She wouldn't be found until that Sunday. And the man who killed her wouldn't be found for 26 more years. He lived 2 floors below her. He was questioned by police in 1999 and let go. He spent 2 decades building a reputation as a beloved neighborhood figure, a man who set up a telescope on the sidewalk and taught children about the stars. This is the story of Minerliz Soriano and the monster who hid in plain sight. Welcome to Cold Crime Files. If you're new here, subscribe and let us know where you're watching from so you don't miss our upcoming episodes and true crime breakdowns. Minerliz Soriano was born in Puerto Rico in January 1986. By the time she was 8, her parents had split, and she was sent to live in New York with relatives, eventually settling with her mother in the Morris Park section of the Bronx. Friends called her Minnie. She was small, energetic, and impossible not to notice. Always riding her bike, always roller skating down the block, always somewhere she wasn't supposed to be 5 minutes ago. She was a straight-A student, with a spotty attendance record, the kind of contradiction only a smart kid can pull off. She and her sister sold candy door to door to raise money for school. She babysat her little sister. She did the family's laundry. For a 13-year-old, she carried more weight than most adults noticed or wanted to. But underneath the responsibility was a kid still dreaming in Technicolor. She carried a notebook everywhere and filled it with stories about her future. A boyfriend who'd pull up in a Ferrari, a wedding, a family of her own. Typical 13-year-old fantasy, except for one detail that stood out. She'd recently fallen in love with astronomy. She told her best friend, Kimberly Ortiz, that all she wanted for her birthday was a telescope. She said she wanted to be an astronaut. Kimberly laughed it off. "We're from the Bronx," she told her. "We're not going to be astronauts." They walked to and from school together every day. Sometimes they skipped their after-school program just to sit in the library instead. The kind of harmless rebellion every kid tries once. Minnie wasn't reckless. She wasn't naive. She was a kid navigating a rough neighborhood with more grace than it deserved, still holding on to the version of her future she'd written down in her own handwriting. She had no idea that notebook would be one of the last things left of her. February 24th, 1999, started like any other Wednesday. Minnie went to school, saw her friends, and by 2:20 that afternoon, she was standing outside with Kimberly, deciding what to do next. Minnie wanted to go to the library. Kimberly couldn't. Her mother had already caught them skipping once. So they hugged, and Kimberly watched her walk toward the bus stop. That was the last time anyone who knew her would see her alive. Minnie usually picked up her little sister, Nadia, from school before heading home. That day, she never showed. Nadia walked home alone, and when she arrived without her sister, the family's stomach dropped. They searched everywhere they could think of before finally calling the police around 7 p.m. An officer showed up, took the report, and told the family what officers often say in the first hours of a disappearance. She probably just lost track of time. Maybe she's with friends. But her family knew better. This wasn't like Minnie. Investigators later pieced together her final movements: leaving school, boarding the BX-12 bus, getting off near her building, and then nothing. Somewhere between that bus stop and her front door, a 13-year-old girl disappeared into thin air in a city of 8 million people without a single witness coming forward. 4 days of searching. 4 days of flyers, search parties, and a growing $11,000 reward. 4 days of a family refusing to accept the worst. Then Sunday came. February 28th, 1999. A homeless man sifting through dumpsters behind a Hollywood video on Bartow Avenue found a heavy black bag. Inside was Minnie's body, wrapped carefully, almost deliberately. The medical examiner ruled her cause of death as compression to the neck. No signs of a struggle. She was fully clothed. But investigators found something else. Traces of semen on her sweatshirt. The one piece of evidence that would sit in a lab, waiting for technology to catch up to it. Her red jacket and her backpack were never recovered. Detectives worked the case hard in those first weeks. They recanvassed the neighborhood. They rode the bus lines and interviewed every driver. They compared DNA against 13 known sex offenders in the database. Nothing matched. Everyone in her building was questioned, including a quiet, unassuming neighbor 2 floors below her. A man who told police he'd seen Minnie around the complex, selling candy and playing outside. He wasn't considered a suspect. He was cleared, like almost everyone else, and the case went cold. Minnie's funeral came and went. Her father noticed something that haunted him for years afterward. Her mother and stepfather never showed up. Not to the wake, not to the service. It was one more unanswered question layered on top of the biggest one. Who did this to his daughter? For 22 years, there were no new leads, no tips, no closure, just a family that refused to let her be forgotten, and a killer who, as it turned out, never left the neighborhood at all. In 2018, detectives requested something that didn't exist as an investigative tool back in 1999. Familial DNA analysis. Instead of searching for an exact match, investigators search for a partial one. A sibling, a parent, a blood relative of whoever left that DNA behind. It's the same technique that finally caught the Golden State Killer, decades after his last known crime. In 2019, the semen sample from Minnie's sweatshirt was run through New York's DNA database. No direct match, but a partial one. The DNA belonged to a relative of a convicted felon. Investigators built a family tree. 5 possible male relatives. 2 were ruled out immediately, too young to have committed the crime in 1999. That left 3. And that's when detectives noticed something that should have been obvious 20 years earlier. One of those 3 men had lived in Minnie's own building, 2 floors below her. They quietly collected a discarded DNA sample from him and sent it to the lab. It was a direct match. His name was Joseph Martinez. By 2021, he was 49 years old, living in New Rochelle, and known throughout the Bronx by a very different identity, Jupiter Joe. For over a decade, he'd set up a telescope on busy sidewalks, teaching strangers, kids especially, about the moon, the planets, the stars. He had a YouTube channel. He was well-liked, well-known, and completely unsuspected. He'd even been interviewed by police back in 1999, describing seeing Minnie around the building. He was cleared then. Nobody looked twice. When police finally came back for him in November 2021, Martinez asked for a lawyer. Witnesses say he had what one detective described as a 10,000-yard stare, like a man who genuinely believed he'd gotten away with it. 22 years, 2 floors below her, teaching children to look up at the sky while the truth sat buried underground. Martinez pleaded not guilty. His attorney called the case unusual. A 49-year-old man with no prior criminal record, suddenly accused of a crime a quarter-century old. For years, the case moved slowly through the courts, while Martinez maintained his innocence. Then, in November 2025, 26 years after Minnie disappeared, a Bronx jury sat through a trial that lasted over a month. Prosecutors laid out what the DNA had already proven. The semen on her sweatshirt matched Martinez, and no one else on earth. The jury found him guilty on 2 counts of second-degree murder. In March 2026, Martinez stood before a judge for sentencing. He offered condolences to Minnie's family, but he still said he disagreed with the verdict. "I still hold true to my convictions," he told the court. The judge wasn't moved. 25 years to life. Minnie's father, Minerliz Soriano, had waited over 2 decades for this moment. Speaking through an interpreter, he said what he needed to say directly. He wanted Martinez kept in the deepest, darkest place possible for the rest of his life. Prosecutors described what Martinez had built in the years since the murder. A public image of warmth and generosity that let him hide for 3 decades in plain sight. He thought, they said, that he'd outsmarted everyone. He hadn't. Science finally caught up to him. Minnie would have turned 40 this year. Kimberly Ortiz still thinks about that last hug outside the school gates. She was the last person who knew Minnie to ever see her alive, other than the man who killed her. For 26 years, a family held on to a promise made at a casket they refused to let go of. We will find who did this, and we will never let her be forgotten. They kept that promise. It just took longer than anyone should ever have to wait. Minnie wanted to be an astronaut. She never got the chance to look at the stars the way she dreamed of. But she's not forgotten. Not anymore. Let me know your thoughts in the comments. Write Minerliz Soriano's name in the comments section, like this video, and share it if you found this case important. See you in the next episode.